Hi guys, welcome to the next session in TestNG series. So in this session we will see how to use the data provider in TestNG. So in previous session we have seen how we can achieve the parameterization in TestNG with the help of @parameters annotation in the TestNG class and parameter tag in the TestNG XML file. So another way by which we can achieve the parameterization in TestNG is by using the data provider. Okay, data provider concept. So you should know the basic difference between these two approach. You can achieve the parameterization with the help of @parameters annotation, and second is by using the data provider. So what is the basic difference between these two approach? Okay, so when we can use the data provider in TestNG, so we can use the data provider in TestNG for parameterization when we want to run a single test multiple times, okay, with the different set of data, okay, which we also called as a data driven testing. So to understand this, let us consider a scenario. Let's say I have a create loan TestNG method for creating the loan for customers. Okay, so I need to create the loan for 5 different customers. Okay, 5 different customers means they have their different first name, last name, city, or you can say the country, email ID, phone number, right? But my TestNG method to create the loan will be the same. Okay, that is create loan. That means we will have to run the create loan method 5 times with different set of data. Okay, so to handle this scenario we can use the two approach. The previous one that we have already seen in the previous session by using the @parameters annotation in the TestNG class and parameter tag in the TestNG XML file, and then we will see how we can achieve the same by using the @data provider. And then you will understand for handling this kind of scenario when you want to run a single TestNG method for multiple times with different set of data, then why the second approach is the best way and more effective than the first approach. So let's see the difference practically now. So let's say I have a banking application in which there is a module by which I can create the loan for the customers. Okay, so this is the method we are going to use. Okay, so in real time project there will be a actual logic available under this create loan method. Okay, so as of now I am just going to print the details. Okay, so for creating loan I will require the user, okay, first user, second user, and I will require the customer details. Okay, the user details, their first name, last name, their country, or email ID, phone number, like that. Okay, so that data I will provide to this method, and then this method will create the loan for that customer, particular user. So for every customer I will have to run this same method. Okay, only the data will be different for every customer, right? So let's say I want to create the loan for 5 customers as per my scenario. So I will have to run this create loan method 5 times. Okay, so as per our first approach by using the @parameters annotation, I have defined this annotation here. Okay, so this TestNG method is going to use this @parameters. Okay, and these are the two parameters I am going to send from my TestNG XML file. Okay, so this is my TestNG XML file, and this is the test one. Okay, and this for this test I have defined these two parameters. So if you have watched the previous session in the TestNG series, you will understand it completely. We have these two parameters, user, and this is the value, and my second parameter is customer details, and this is the value I am going to send for that customer. Okay, so this is for only one customer, and I am going to run this method. Okay, so this is my first test. So if I run this TestNG method, then it will create the loan for my first customer. Okay, first user. So it has run successfully. Okay, for this user one. And if you see the console, you can see creating the loan for the user. This is the user one, and data used to create the loan. This is the data that we have sent from our TestNG XML file. So by using this TestNG test, I have created the loan for my first customer by running this TestNG method. So now I want to create the loan for 5 customers, means 4 more customers. So what I will have to do is I will have to copy this test. Okay, and I will add it here. So this will be my second test. Okay, I will send some kind of different data here. Okay, and this is my user 2. Okay, so I have this 5 tests for separate user. So user 1 have this data, then for user 2 I will send this data, then for user 3, for user 4, and user 5. Okay, so for each and every user, if I want to create the loan, I will have to run the same TestNG test method multiple times. Okay, 5 times. So for that purpose I have defined this 5 test here. Okay, test 1 to test 5 under this TestNG XML file. Okay, so if we run this now, So it has run all the tests, test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4 and test 5. Okay, and for every user we have created the loan with this different set of data, right? So my method is same, create loan, only the data is different for that TestNG method. So what is the drawback of this approach is, so here we have just created the loan for only 5 customers, okay, for which we have defined the 5 tests, okay, under this TestNG XML file. So if I want to create the loan for 1000 customers, okay, in real time, for example, I want to create the loan for 1000 different customers. Then with this approach, if I want to use this approach as a parameterization, then I will have to define 1000 tests in the TestNG XML file. So it will take a long time for adding all those details, 1000 test details in the TestNG XML file. So with this first approach, we are just increasing the length of our TestNG XML file. Unnecessary, we are wasting our time adding these details for 1000 customers, or if I want to update any details for any customer. Okay, it is just a waste of time and not a good approach. Okay, so what will be the best approach if I want to create the loan? That means if I want to run a single TestNG method multiple times. Okay, it doesn't matter how many times I am going to run that method. So best approach is to use the parameterization with the @DataProvider. Okay, so now let's see how we can use the data provider for handling the same scenario. So while using the data provider for parameterization, we can define and using the data provider in the same class, okay, that we will see. And another approach is defining the data provider in one class and then using it in another TestNG class. Okay, so both the things we will see one by one. So first let's look at the syntax of the data provider. Okay, so as name suggests, data provider, that means this data provider is going to provide some data to the TestNG test method. Okay, that's why we called it as a data provider. It is going to provide the test data to the TestNG test method. So this is the syntax for @DataProvider annotation. Okay, provide @DataProvider, and under the bracket you have to provide the name of the data provider. Okay, just give some meaningful name to that data provider. And this data provider we have to apply for a method. Okay, so there will be some method name. You can provide any method name here, and that method is going to return the object of two-dimensional array. Okay, so that's why I have written here object, and this is the two-dimensional array. That means this method is going to return object of two-dimensional array. So whatever data this data provider is going to use, that is going to use by this TestNG test method. Okay, so that we have know how we can define the TestNG test method. Okay, so that will be a normal Java method. Okay, only we need to use the @test annotation above it. So after providing the @test annotation in the bracket, just provide the data provider equal to and provide the name of the data provider. Okay, name of the data provider this TestNG method is going to use. So whatever name I have provided here for this data provider under the bracket, same name I will provide in the double quote here. Okay, so this method is going to return some data in the form of two-dimensional array, and that data I am going to reuse under my TestNG test method. Okay, so now let's see the practical implementation for this data provider from the Eclipse. Okay, so this is the TestNG test method I want to run multiple times. Okay, so I will first define our @DataProvider annotation. Okay, @DataProvider, under the bracket just provide the name of your data provider. So name equal to, in double quote I will give some, let's say, test data. So test data is my data provider name. So under this data provider I will have to define one simple Java method. So let's say public get customer details. This is my method. Okay, and this method should return the object of two-dimensional array. Okay, so first let me define the object of two-dimensional array. Okay, so I will use the reference of object class object. Okay, and my reference name, let's say data equal to. So if I want to store some data in the two-dimensional array, I will have to add it in the two curly bracket, right? Okay, so under these two brackets I will have my test data. Okay, so under the first curly bracket I will have the first data, means details for the first customer. Then in the second curly bracket I will have another data for another customer. Okay, so similarly I will create this 5 different data for 5 different customers. So this is the different set of data I am going to send for these 5 different customers. Okay, so I am going to return this data. That means I will have to return the reference of this two-dimensional array, that is data, return data semicolon. So as this method is going to return the object of two-dimensional array, we will have to add the return type of this method as object and two-dimensional array. So our data provider method is ready. Okay, so this method is going to return test data to the TestNG test method. Okay, so this data is going to be used by this create loan TestNG test method. So if I want to use the data from this data provider in this TestNG test method, I will have to use this @test annotation in the bracket, provide the data provider equal to, and provide the name of the data provider you are going to use for this create loan TestNG test method. Okay, so in real time you may have multiple data providers defined in the same class. So that's why you need to provide the meaningful name for the data provider. Okay, so same name I need to provide in the TestNG test method. Okay, so this TestNG test method create loan is going to use the data from this data provider test data. Okay, so this method is going to return the object of two-dimensional array. Okay, so that I will get here, and that data will be in a string format, right? I'm sending the string format data, so I will catch that data in the string user, where I will catch user1, user2, user3, 4 and 5. Okay, and in this customer details variable, I will get all this data one by one. Okay, so same we are going to print here in the console. Okay, so we are creating the loan for 5 different customers. Okay, so I don't require to run this TestNG test method 5 times. Okay, I will just have to run this TestNG test method single times, and it will create the loan for 5 customers in a single run. Okay, so that is the main use of our data provider. Okay, so I am running the TestNG test method multiple times in a single run. Okay, so whatever data this data provider is going to provide. Okay, so currently we are providing only 5 details for 5 customers. So you can provide the data for 1000 customers also. So in a single run, the loans for 1000 customers will be created. Okay, so you don't require to run that method again and again. Okay, that means I will just run this method only once. Okay, from here, and if you see, this method has run 5 times with the different set of test data. So in the console, you can see whatever data we have provided from our data provider, that same has used in the TestNG test method. So internally, when we run this create loan method, okay, so for the first iteration, this data provider will return this data. Okay, the first details for the first customer. Okay, the same will be printed. Then again, in the second iteration, it will automatically send this data. Okay, in sequential manner. Then third, fourth, and fifth. So we have executed this create loan method only once, but it has used the different set of test data 5 times. So with the first approach, we have to create the multiple test here in the TestNG test, right? For 1000 customers, you would have required to create the 1000 test here with the different set of test data. And with the second approach, we have just created a two-dimensional array and added all the details in that array. Okay, and only once we have run the TestNG test method. Okay, so you can run this method from here by clicking on the run, or you can provide the details in the TestNG XML files. Okay, so only this time I just required a single test here. Okay, so I don't require this multiple test. Okay, so I can give some name here. Test is, let's say, create loan. So I will not require these parameters now. Okay, so my test is create loan, and this is the method I am going to use. Okay, so whatever test data I am going to use for this create loan test method is already added in our data provider. Okay, so if we run from here also, it will run the same TestNG test method 5 times. Okay, so you can see that it has created the loan for 5 customers. So in the console, you can see total test run are 5 and pass 5. Okay, so even if we have run only a single test from the TestNG XML file, but as we have used the data provider concept for parameterization, so our data provider contains 5 different customer details, right? So that's why this method has executed 5 times. Okay, so that's why we are able to see the total test run are 5. Okay, so this is the second approach by which we can do the parameterization in the TestNG for handling this kind of scenarios. Okay, when we want to run a single TestNG test multiple times with the different set of test data. Okay, in the data driven testing. So until now we have covered this scenario, defining and using the data provider in the same TestNG class, right? So our data provider and my TestNG test method is in the same class, right? So this is my TestNG class, a data provider example 1, which contains both data provider and TestNG test method. Now my second scenario is defining a data provider in one TestNG class, and I will use that data from the data provider in the TestNG test method which is available in the another TestNG class. So this data provider and this TestNG test method are available in the same TestNG class, right? So what I will do is I will remove this data provider from this class. Okay, so this class only contains the TestNG test method that we need to run multiple times. Okay, and data provider, this TestNG test method is going to use is available in another TestNG class. Okay, so let's say I have this data provider example 2 TestNG class, and in this class I will add our data provider details. Okay, so this is the data provider name equal to test data 1. Okay, this is the method name. Okay, so from here I am passing my test data to the TestNG test method. Okay, so this data provider I can use for any TestNG test method in any of the TestNG classes available in our project. Okay, so if I want to use this data provider in this class, okay, in another class in data provider example 1, so I cannot directly use it. Okay, so even though I have provided the data provider details here, okay, so these details are correct. My data provider name is test data, right? But that data provider is available in the another class. Okay, now it is not available in the same class. So now let us run this create loan TestNG method, and let's see if we can get this user and customer details from the data provider available in the another TestNG class. So if I click on run, then we have got some exception here, org.testng exception. Okay, so if I go to the console, method public void package 3 data provider example 1 create loan. Okay, so this is my TestNG test method requires at the data provider name test data. Okay, so that is correct. I have declared here that this create loan TestNG method is going to use the data provider. Okay, data from this data provider test data. But TestNG is not able to find such data provider in the same TestNG class. Okay, so currently TestNG is searching for the data provider in the same TestNG class. Okay, so that's why we got this TestNG exception here. Okay, so it is unable to find the data provider. So how to solve this issue? Okay, so in real time I can have my data provider in a separate TestNG class, and that data provider I can use in the different TestNG classes. Okay, so how to handle this scenario? So very simple. Whatever method, the TestNG test method for which we are going to use that data provider, you need to add one more details for that at the rate test annotation. Okay, so at the rate test annotation you have provided the data provider name, and then comma, you need to provide one more detail here. Here we need to provide the data provider class details. Okay, so this is the data provider class equal to, and here I need to provide the details of the TestNG class in which my data provider is defined. Okay, so currently I have defined our data provider in the data provider example 2 class, right? So same details I need to provide in the TestNG class where we are going to use that data provider. Okay, so I'm going to use my data provider for this create loan in this class. So I will have to provide the details of the class in which data provider is available. Okay, so data provider example 2, this is the class in which my data provider is available. So just have to write the dot class. Okay, so this is how you need to add the data when your TestNG test method is available in the one TestNG class and your data provider is available in another TestNG class. Okay, so just provide the TestNG class details here, data provider example 2 dot class. Okay, so now TestNG will be able to understand that this TestNG test method create loan is going to use the data from this test data provider, which is available in this class data provider example2 dot class. Okay, and this time we should not get this TestNG exception here. Okay, so it will be able to find that data provider now. Okay, so let's save it and let's run this now. Okay, so now we can see our test has run successfully 5 times. Okay, and in the console you can see total test runs are 5 and pass 5. So I hope these two examples will clear your concept about the data provider in the TestNG. Okay, so for achieving the parameterization in the TestNG, we can use the two approach. One is by using the @parameters annotation in the TestNG class and parameter tag in the TestNG XML file. But with this approach, if I want to handle this kind of scenario where I need to run a single TestNG test method, okay, the same TestNG test method, if I want to run the multiple times, then I would have required to add the different parameters, their values, and different tests in the TestNG XML file. So this will just waste a lot of your time for adding and updating the details in the multiple test in the TestNG XML file, right? So instead of that, we have seen how data provider will be very useful for handling this kind of scenario. So in that also we have seen two approach. One is defining and using the data provider in the same class. That means my TestNG test method and my data provider are available in the same TestNG class. And second approach is my data provider is available in the one TestNG class, and TestNG test method which is going to use the data provider is available in another TestNG class. Okay, so both approach are very important for interview point of view, and same we can implement in our real-time projects also. So for these examples, you can see I have hard-coded all this test data in the array itself. So another thing we can do is if I have 1000 customer details. Okay, so instead of adding all these 1000 customer details in the array itself in the TestNG class, you can save this 1000 customer details in the, let's say, Excel, or you can save it in the CSV also. Okay, so that approach will be more beneficial, because if I want to add some more details or if I want to update any details for any customer, it will be easy to find and easy to update, right? So I don't require any detail about my data provider, which is where it is available. Okay, so I would have required to come to the data provider and update all those details. Okay, so it would be better if you drive your test data from external files by saving it in the Excel or CSV, and then you just require the code for reading the Excel or reading the CSV. Okay, so just read that data from the CSV or Excel and save it in the data provider again. So maybe I will try to create the session where we will see how we can get the data from externally from Excel or CSV file and save it in the data provider. Okay, and then the same data we can use in our TestNG test method for running multiple times. So there are some important points you should remember in case of data provider. So the name attribute is optional. Okay, so whatever name you are providing for this data provider, okay, so this is my name attribute. So this name attribute is optional in case of data provider. Okay, so if you do not provide any name attribute for your data provider, then the method name would be considered as a data provider name. Okay, so TestNG required some name to your data provider to use it. Okay, so if in case if you do not provide any name to your data provider, TestNG will use your TestNG test method name as a data provider name. Okay, so that also I will show you. And last point you need to remember is data provider returns a two-dimensional array object. Okay, so this is important. So let's see if I do not provide any name to my data provider, the TestNG should use the TestNG test method name. Okay, so this is my data provider. So what I will do, I will remove this name. Okay, so in this example, I do not have any name to my data provider. So what will be my data provider name? So in this case, my data provider name will be my method name. Okay, so this is my data provider method name, get customer details. Okay, so this will be used as a data provider name, get customer details. You can copy this name and I will provide for this method. Okay, so for this create loan, I am going to use the data from this get customer details data provider. Okay, so this is my method name. It is not my data provider name. But as we have not provided any name to my data provider, TestNG will consider this name as my data provider name, and it will use it while running the TestNG test. So you can see TestNG has used the data from that data provider. Okay, so it has used the method name as a data provider name here. So that's all for this session, guys. This concept parameterization in the TestNG is most important, one of the most important in the TestNG series, and you should know this both approach. Okay, both approach are very important. The parameterization with the help of parameter annotation, and with the help of data provider. And in the next session we will see how to use the same data provider for sending the set of data to multiple TestNG methods. Okay, so we have seen how we can use the data provider for the single TestNG method, but in next session I will cover how we can use the same data provider. Okay, so I will have single data provider, but that data provider will be used by multiple TestNG test methods. Okay, so that I will cover in the next session. So thank you guys, see you soon.